Hi everyone. Just wanted to kind of get back in touch, see how you are. Hope you're all doing well. We've finished the Viking unit. Well done everyone for sending all the work, getting through it. I know it was really, really challenging and I'm so proud of everybody for keeping going. We're now kind of moving on to the Skipton Castle unit. So I wanted to introduce it properly, give you a little tour of the castle. We were supposed to go in May, but obviously we couldn't, and I'm not entirely sure when we will be able to go to the castle, if we can at all. So I'm going to take you around it today via pictures and also going to kind of just give you a little overview of the unit itself. I mean, there is nothing stopping you if you wanted to with your parents. When everything is up and running again, you could go for the tour yourself. You don't need a specialist tour. It's just good to be able to see the kind of physical features that we're talking about when we look at the history. So the unit itself is part of a unit called History Around Us. So the idea is that schools pick a local site or a site close by to them to pick as their site study. So we went for Skipton Castle because it's got loads of interesting history. You already know stuff about the medieval period. It fits in quite nicely with some of the stuff from Crime and Punishment, and it works really, really well. Now, like the other units, it's worth 20% of your GCSE. And the exam for Skipton is on its own. It's 1 hour long and you have to answer 2 out of 3 questions. So they'll give you a choice of 3. There's usually one really challenging one and 2 that are, quite easy to answer. So we do find that students do particularly well on this Skipton unit. Now, the 2 questions are both worth 20 marks and they also have 5 spag marks per question. So the paper in total is worth 50. There's no spag marks on any of the other papers, but this one, you've got 10 marks. So it's extremely important that you remember that when you're doing this paper. Now, the exam board weirdly refer to it as paper 2. It's actually the first history paper you sit, and usually it's the first Monday morning after May half term. So it should have been happening this Monday just gone. So with the history exams, we're really quite lucky because you start some of them before May half term, and actually we get some really good revision time in half term, and then you come back Monday morning ready to do Skipton Castle. So I just wanted to show you some of the examples of what the papers will look like. The question structure for these is really, really easy. They're essentially 10-mark questions worth 20 marks with a conclusion. So you do 3 point develop link paragraphs and you add a conclusion. Your paper will look exactly like this, and what you get is a blank answer booklet, and it just has at the top your site is, and you just have to remember to write Skipton Castle. Now, if you have a look at the questions, you'll see that it says your site. This is because all schools who sit this paper can choose any site that they want. So the same paper gets sent out to everybody at the same time, but you'll get people writing about the Tower of London, or you'll get people writing about the town of Bath. It depends what they've done. If you have a look at the questions, they look quite wordy. Actually, they're not that bad. Like I said, this is usually a paper where people do the best. Explain the reasons why people first created your site within its surroundings, use features of the site, as well as your knowledge to support your answer. You literally need to come up with 3 reasons why they decided to build Skipton Castle in that place and explain them. But this is the reason why I wanted to show you around the site, because the use of physical features is really, really important. So you need to be able to describe like the back of the castle and how that gave them a really good fence, or you need to be able to write about the fact that it was put on a hill, so it was high up, so you could see the town below. So that's why I wanted to show you around. So, tour of the castle. We should have been going on the trip in May. Unfortunately, it couldn't happen. So I'm going to take you around. Now, obviously, some of this was built for the live session. So just like you to know, if you are watching this on the YouTube channel, either have the worksheet open on your computer that you've downloaded from Class Charts. It's got little pictures on it. The pictures will also be shown in this PowerPoint. And I want you to basically type up some of the things that I'm telling you, because as we kind of go through the actual history of the castle in the remote lessons, I'll bring you back to some of these pictures so you know what the features are. So if you can have it open, you can pause the video, brilliant, type it up, then get it sent to your teacher. Or if you prefer just to watch straight through, grab a pen, grab some paper, make some notes, and then type it up later on. Okay, so a little bit of background. Skipton Castle was built in 1090 by a guy called Robert de Ramil. Now, he was a Norman, and he'd supported William the Conqueror in his invasion of England. Remember the Norman Conquest, 1066, Battle of Hastings? He was a big part of that. The castle that exists today is not the castle built in 1090. The original castle was made from wood. We will show you examples of what it would have looked like in the next kind of early lessons. But the rebuilding, the castle that you see today, the initial building in stone began in the 1300s after the wooden castle was attacked and burned by the Scots. Now, even though it's the Ramil family that it's built by, the family really associated with the castle through history are the Cliffords. So you'll hear me talking about the Cliffords. And if you're thinking, oh my God, who's that? I don't know who that is. Don't worry, because we need to teach you the history. I want to show you the physical features first, and then we will teach you the history. So let's start with our tour. Now, we'd have kind of come from the back of the castle where the car park is. We'd have walked around the walls, and this is where we would have entered. This is the gatehouse of the castle. This is the main kind of weakness almost of a castle, the entryway. So they make it as strong as possible. Now, the two kind of towers you see, they would have been there in the 1300s, but you will notice that I've got the date 1619, 1629 at the top. That's because the gatehouse was remodeled. And you see the kind of crest in the middle, the little motto at the top, désormais, which means henceforth. Okay, it's a Clifford family motto. This was remodeled by a lady called Lady Anne Clifford. Skipton Castle was heavily destroyed in the English Civil War. Most of the top of it was taken off. Now, Lady Anne Clifford, it was a family home. She wanted to rebuild it. She was given permission to by Oliver Cromwell, who had won the English Civil War. But he said to her, you can no longer use it as a defensive feature. You have to use it as a home. So she made lots of big changes to Skipton Castle. Now, one of the reasons that we choose Skipton Castle is because in this paper, you're asked to talk about change and continuity over time. What happens to the castle? Why? How do the physical features alter? What made this happen? Skipton Castle is brilliant because the main parts of the castle, you've got the 13th century, you've got the Tudor period, big building, and then you've got the 1600s, huge changes. So Skipton Castle is a real mishmash that you can pick out different features of to help you answer the questions. So the gatehouse, this is where you would enter. Now, if you see those black doors, just behind those, that lady there, on the right-hand side is the ticket office. It's inside, kind of right through it. I know you can't really see what I'm pointing at. Just imagine that I'm pointing at the right through it. Inside there is actually the ticket office, and it's something inside something called the grotto. Now, it's really, really interesting. I've not got a picture of it. I'm dead sorry. I'll try and find you one. But the walls are all covered in shells. Now, this was done by one of the lords of Skipton just because he could. He had money, he wanted to do something with it. His castle was no longer being used as a defence. It was more of a home. So he just made it just for the sake of it because that's what people did in those days. So we're going to move through the gatehouse into the castle itself. So what you can see here is an aerial shot of Skipton Castle. Now, the red arrow shows you where the gatehouse is. And in front of the gatehouse is the main street of Skipton. Now, this is one of the reasons why that gatehouse is where it is. You know, imagine this is the 1300s. This would be the main thoroughfare that if anybody was going to attack the castle, that's the way that they are coming. So you're protecting that weakest point. Now, something really interesting about Skipton Castle, the first gatehouse wasn't actually there. It was round the other side, and I'll show you where it was. You'll also notice next to the gatehouse, there's a church. One of the reasons that Robert de Ramil chose this site was because a church was on that land. And him being able to build his initial kind of fortress next to a church showed how powerful he was, showed that he was close to God, and he hoped it would help him to kind of control the local people. So there's the gatehouse. So when you walk through the gatehouse, this is what you see in front of you. This, the round bits with the towers, this is the medieval part of the castle. This was the bit that was rebuilt around the 1300s. Okay, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's an entrance. That's not from the 1300s. That bit is a little bit newer. It was during Lady Anne Clifford's rebuilding in the 1600s. If you kind of look to the right, you'll see this other bit of the castle. This bit is what is called the Tudor wing. This was built for the niece of one of the, I'll start again. The Lord of Skipton Castle, his daughter was marrying Henry VIII's nephew. And they wanted to kind of show their power, their wealth, by building this new lovely home. Now, this part of the house, of the castle, we can't actually go in. Skipton Castle is still inhabited by the people who own it, who are called the Fattorini family. Now, for anybody who's interested, they are trophy makers. They actually made the FA Cup, and that's where they live. So you're only actually allowed to tour the medieval part of the castle, but that bit is still inhabited. It was built during the Tudor period. It was built in 1535. So there's a little bit of a closer look there for you. And you can see it's much more like a house. Look at all those windows. Now, another reason why they built it like this was because people at this time wanted to live in wealth and in kind of luxury. There were no wars going on in England. England wasn't really being threatened. So they didn't have to worry about it. They wanted to live like a luxury home, basically, rather than a fortress. You can kind of see here the differences between the two. The medieval bit on the left-hand side and the bit from the Tudor period on the right-hand side. Now, if you imagine this view, okay, this is what you can see. You can see a chapel on the grounds of the castle. This was built in the 1300s, and the castle itself was rebuilt in stone. Lords would often do this as a private place to have their own worship. It also showed your wealth and power and how close you were to God and how deserving you were to rule over everybody else. Follow the little red arrow to the left. Down there is kind of the gift shop. Now, the gift shop is something that you'd think, oh, why do I write about that in the history? If you're writing about how the castle has changed over time, you can explain how a gift shop was added into the walls of the castle in the 20th century to deal with tourists. So, you know, even things like that you can use in your answer. And you can see where the little arrow is here. That is where the cafe and gift shop are. So they're right next to the entrance kind of guardhouse, the gate entrance, but they're built into what would have been the initial defensive walls of the castle. So back to the castle, you can see where the arrow is pointing. That's pointing at something called an arrow slit. Now, this is a defensive feature. These were built during the 1300s to help defend the castle. You look a little bit closer, they look like this. The aim of that was that somebody could be stood behind it with a crossbow, with a bow and arrow, and they could fire out of it. This is the view that they would have, okay? That's the front gatehouse. They have a perfect view of whoever is coming through if the castle is attacked. However, if you look at how thin they are, the probability of somebody who is attacking being able to actually fire an arrow at that arrow slit and get it inside, slim. So the purpose of castles is to defend the people within them. And this is one of the kind of technological innovations of the 1300s that people came up with to help defend themselves. Now, you'll notice, if you look where the arrow slit is, okay, if you look above that, there's some windows. Why would a castle have windows? That's not good for defence. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Skipton Castle was damaged. It was slighted. It took about a third of the height of it when it was taken in the English Civil War. When Lady Anne wanted to rebuild, she was told that she couldn't make it into a defensive fortress anymore, so she rebuilt it, adding windows, okay? And you can see the line. If you look where the two windows are, where the arrow is pointing, there's like a ridge line underneath. This is the bit that was rebuilt. Okay. The other arrow pointing at the roof, just to kind of indicate that they had to change the roof. She had to make the roof like this, which is pitched, which is what we have on our houses today. Skipton Castle originally had a roof like this. It was flat, and you could put cannons on it in the 17th century. So she was told that she had to build it like this, so she couldn't put cannons on top of the roof anymore, which would make it a defensive feature. So there's a few changes in Skipton that make it, one, for a reason, less defence, two, make it a little bit more like a house. So we're going to take a kind of tour around the side of the castle. We're going to go up towards that entrance you can see on the left there. And what we're going to do now is go to the side of that huge tower. Now the arrow is pointing at something which is called a skirt. These jut out from the bottom of the towers. Now, these are another medieval defensive feature. What you would have is you would have people who can be stood on the roof, and then they can drop rocks, and these rocks would drop down the side of the castle, and as soon as they hit the skirt, they fire outwards. So anybody walking up that main drive is being attacked by arrows and having rocks flying at them. Again, a defensive feature. So we're going to walk through this entrance, okay? Now, if you look at it from this view, I've shown you this view because actually this was the original way which you would have entered the castle. This new kind of entranceway was built in the 1600s, and it was built by Lady Anne Clifford. She added it on, made it look all nice. But originally, you see where the little shed is, where it says 20th century, which I'll tell you about in a minute. That's the way you would have entered the castle. And the reason for that is because that's where the kind of first bit of settlement was for Skipton Castle. But as Skipton developed and it actually moved around the other side of the castle to where the gatehouse is now, they changed the entrance. So I just wanted to kind of draw your attention between the difference between the two parts of these buildings. The entryway that we're going to walk through was built in the 1600s, 1657 to 1659. And the bit on the right-hand side, that's the medieval bit. The little kind of shed on the left-hand side, that's the toilets. Those were built in the 20th century to accommodate tourists. Again, a change that you can mention if you're asked about change over time. So let's go through the door. What we're going to do is go through the door, and the next kind of picture that you will see will have turned right. So we're actually kind of in the bit underneath the red arrow with two little arrowheads. So this is the entryway. This would have been the old medieval entrance to the castle. In front of us, you can see an arch. There's another one behind where we stood. And there would have been two doors in here, heavily barred, to kind of stop people getting through. Above, you can see there's like a plaster ceiling. This at one time would have actually been open. So if anybody managed to get through the first doors and into the just before the second lot, you could shoot arrows at them, you could pour boiling water on them. It was like a killing zone. You can also see there's an arrow pointing down to the floor. This floor, which is stone now, would have been wooden, and if anybody got in, they could have dropped to the floor, which would have gone down to the dungeon below, which wasn't a dungeon at the time. It would have actually been filled with spikes or another defensive feature to kind of stop people getting into the castle. That just shows you kind of one of the door jambs. If you can just kind of think how big that is and how big the kind of hinges are on the side, just maybe how thick and wide the doors would have been, because it was all about defence. Now, this is what's known as the conduit court. This is the kind of central hub of the castle which everything revolves around. This bit is purely from the 1600s. Look at the windows, look at the crests, look at the tree. This was all there to kind of make the castle look nice. This has nothing to do with defence. Now, the tree in the middle is an ash tree, and that was actually planted by Lady Anne Clifford when to kind of celebrate the restoration and the completion of the castle. So it's a tree in the middle. You can see a few different arrows. If you take a look at the arrow in the bottom right, which is pointing towards a doorway, that's where we're going to go next. Okay. So this would have been the guard room. The guard would have been sat in here. He would have been able to see into the entranceway that we've just come through, and the door in front of us, there's also a space in that room for an arrow slit. So they would have had a good view of people coming into the castle, through the door and up the main drive. The hole in the wall that the arrow is indicating is something called a squint. Now, what you would do with this is, if you were actually being attacked, you would have one person kind of firing arrows through the arrow loop, but you could also see if anybody was coming from behind. Another defensive feature. We're now back to the court, and we're going to go down to the left and show you the dungeon. So down the steps, these are quite uneven steps, and then here is the dungeon or the prison. Now, this was used to hold prisoners. If you can remember from Crime and Punishment, there would be things called quarter sessions, where 4 times a year you would be sent to a big court if you'd done something quite serious. Now, the nearest quarter sessions to Skipton Castle was held in York. So if the quarter sessions had just happened and you committed a crime that meant you should be going to the quarter sessions court and you were caught, you would be put in this dungeon. And you'd be put in this dungeon prison for 3 months until the next court happened, when you would have to walk to York. Okay. Now, there's no natural light in here. It's very, very small. It also kind of slopes downhill, so anybody's toilet business would also be down there at the bottom. It's absolutely pitch black. Now, one of the reasons why I've put the arrows there is to show that this is kind of the ceiling that would have originally been wood before it was a prison, so they could drop people in. Now, in 1199, it was ordered that all fortresses or all towns had to have a prison. So a prison was built at Skipton Castle because in 1199 they said that castles or fortresses or towns had to have a prison. So you'd come back up the steps and back to the court. Now, you can see there's a couple of little steps there on the left-hand side. We're now going to go up those and to the kind of first level of the castle. This is part of the kitchen. What you're looking at here is a huge fireplace, but also an oven. There is one behind us on the other side. These would have been constantly going to keep people fed, to make sure there's enough bread and things like that. And what you can see there, those little holes, they are medieval ovens. Also in the kitchen, strangely to us, okay, is this. This is in the middle of the room. There's a little doorway through to this, which is called the long drop. This is a medieval toilet. And the reason it's called the long drop is because you would sit there and then you would do your business and it would drop a long way into the river below. The medieval people didn't understand germs like we do. They would just kind of wipe their hand on a bit of a rag and carry on cooking. It was convenient for it to be here because a lot of people worked in the kitchens, and it was also a good place to be able to drop into the river. So when you leave the kitchen, you come to this, which is the Great Hall or the main hall. This is where lots of activity would have taken place. This is where everybody would have eaten their meals together. The Lord would have sat round about roughly where the benches are. He would have been raised up so people could see him, could survey what was going on. He would get the best choice of food, and also kind of the centre of attention. And if you look on the left-hand side, there's a huge fireplace here. This shows you that this was a room of great activity because it was kept warm all the time. It needed a big fireplace. If you look up to the top, you can see that there's some skylights. They would not have been there during the medieval period. Okay, they were introduced later, just to draw your attention to that. Now, the antlers on the wall are quite an interesting feature. They're from a kind of like reindeer-like animal that's extinct now. And these antlers were given to Skipton Castle by the British Museum. And they gave them during the Second World War, when the Blitz was happening in London, lots of precious artefacts and documents were obviously in danger of being destroyed by bombs. So fortifications like Skipton Castle around the country took in documents and artifacts from the different museums to keep them safe. And these were given to Skipton to say thank you, basically, for looking after some of our documents and our artifacts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through that door in front of you and into this place called the withdrawing room. Now, the withdrawing room was the room where the ladies would go after the meals. The role of a lady in the medieval period was very, very different to what it is now. She was seen as a lower class citizen. To a lord, his wife usually would be below his dogs, because they thought that, you know, women had no kind of real importance other than to have children. And that they wouldn't be involved in the important issues of discussing war and organising his workload and things like that. So the ladies would spend a lot of time in this room. Now, the arrow shows you the windows. And the reason I've kind of drawn your attention to the windows is to show you one of the reasons why Skipton was built where it was. This is a 40-foot drop at the back. Skipton Castle, I apologise for the poor image, but Skipton Castle is built on a hill which then has like a sheer cliff face at the back, and this is a really good defensive technique. You would not be able to attack Skipton Castle from the back. It is impossible. The arrow just shows you roughly where the withdrawing room would be. The vast majority of what you can see here on the left-hand side is the Tudor wing. So this is the other side of the withdrawing room with the fireplace. The cannons would not have been there at the time. They were later added as a decorative feature. This next room, this is the Lord's day room. This is where he would have spent most of his time conducting his business, organising his lands, making sure that his peasants and his knights were doing what he asked them, making kind of administrative decisions. Now, again, I've drawn your attention to the windows. This looks over the court. So he would have had really good view, could see what was going on all around his castle. It's there for a reason. Okay, he's got it there so he can see what's going on. This is the Lord's bedchamber. You can see it's got its own fireplace. I know most of us would think, oh, I wouldn't want to sleep in there at all. But at the time, it would have been, the best room to sleep in. There'd have been a four-poster bed. It would have had kind of coverings over it so that nothing would drop on them in the night. It would be covered around the sides. It really warm and really cosy. And quite often they would get servants to warm the bed for them beforehand anyway by putting like bed pans in. So in the kind of medieval period, this would have been the best place to stay. Now, what we're going to do now is go up into kind of the highest point of the castle, into the top of the towers. Now, the steps here are again built for defence. First of all, most people in the medieval period would have, they would have fought with their right hands, with their swords. So the way that spiral staircases are made is that if you are coming down the stairs, which you would be doing if you were defending the castle, because an attacker would be coming up, they're made so that they're in the direction where your right hand has the advantage. You've got the space, you can get the swing, you can get the power. So that's one way that they help to defend the castle. The other one is they'd introduce something called a trip step. So steps are all the same. They're all the same height. They're supposed to be like that because if they're not, we'll trip up. You know, you notice sometimes if a little bit of a step's come off, like the edging or something, you trip over them. They introduce a trip step on purpose that's a slightly different height to some of the others so that anybody who doesn't know where it is and was attacking would fall over. So up those stairs would lead you into this guard tower. Now, I don't actually have a picture of inside that one, but I do have inside the other one. But what I wanted to do is just draw your attention to this. Inside this tower, where the bottom arrow is posting, is like it shows you the level of where the castle was kind of destroyed to. When you go in the castle, you can actually see it, sit on it, and you can see how much Lady Anne Clifford had to rebuild. So that red arrow there kind of shows you where the bottom one, where it was destroyed to, and then you can see the bit that she built underneath. They think that actually it was higher than that, but she couldn't build it so high because she wouldn't have been allowed to have her castle rebuilt. We're going to carry on and go into the next guard tower along. So this one here, you can see the windows. The windows would not have been windows in the medieval period. They were again added later by Lady Anne Clifford. They would have been arrow slits. But what I wanted to show you with this, the reason I've got the kind of arrows, is it shows you the view of the attackers, the defensive features that this castle had. So the window on the left, you can perfectly see the gatehouse, and the window on the right, you can perfectly see the entrance to the castle. So if anybody was kind of trying to get through in a first attack in the gatehouse, they've got through there, you can send arrows that way, and then you can also do the same if they've got past you there and are trying to enter the next kind of defensive feature of the castle. So that would bring us down through a kind of doorway. See on the right hand side, now take a look in front of the ash tree. You can see 4 windows. The one on the top right, that's the Lord's Day Room. There's 2 windows below. There's a press in the middle. Through that doorway straight in front of us, that is the 17th century kitchens and smoking room. Not like smoking of pipes and things like that, but smoking of meat that Lady Anne Clifford built. She just added a more modern kitchen for the 1700s, the 1600s, because the medieval kitchen, you know, it wasn't good enough for the kind of technology that they had in the 1600s. So she rebuilt a kitchen, and that's through there. So that concludes our tour of Skipton Castle. I'm sorry you can't ask me any questions, but if you do have any questions that you've thought of while watching the video, you can just send me an email. That's absolutely fine. I'll answer them. And thank you for watching, and I hope to be able to see you very, very soon. Bye.